I noticed that every person who's given a talk this week has spilled their water. So when I saw Allison go to get me a glass, I almost said not to get it. But I thought that the goddess wouldn't like that. She likes the water. So welcome, everyone. Good evening. As Todd said this morning, we're now deep, even deeper into the gathering. And by this time in Sesshin, everyone has had a real lived taste of both the brightness and the kind of awe and joy of intimacy, of meeting your own life, of entering life. And also long enough to experience some real suffering. If my interviews have any indication, or my own life. So there's a tremendous, I was really touched today by the courage and the sincerity of practice that everyone is bringing to the Zendo. And what a strange and mysterious, and in some way there isn't anything else I would rather do with my life. Nothing comes even close to the central question of what it is to be here, to be human, and to stand in your own life. So, Todd, this morning when he sent you out on the walk, he did this beautiful thing where he said, he used part of the poem, and he said, you might, when you go out on the walk, feel the freshness and brightness of things. And you might not have names for things or explanations for them. And you might also discover you don't have an explanation for yourself as well. And then he said, when you encounter something, it explains itself by weaving and interweaving, which I thought was an incredibly beautiful and subtle description of practice. As each thing stands in its own place, we and everything we perceive are interwoven and not interwoven. And this interweaving goes on and on as each thing stands in its own place. I think that's a complete description of Chan, actually. The whole of the Dharma is in that stanza of the poem. And Sesshin, the translation of Sesshin is to touch the heart and mind. And that's what that interweaving is describing, the way during these last days you've been touching your own heart and mind, both the bright bits and the dark bits, the way we suffer and the way you suffer in your particular form is part of touching your own heart-mind. I think it's also a description of Kensho, how Kensho happens, where you feel the world as one seamless field of being without any divisions throughout space and time, but you're here in the center of it and a part of it. I think another image for that is Indra's net, where it's this jeweled net of the universe where each thread meets of the net, there's a jewel, and that's you. Each one of you is a jewel in Indra's net, and you're reflecting every other person in the Zendo, and every other human being, and every tree, and every mountain and river, and the whole universe is reflected in every piece of the universe. And it's pouring through you, every bit of the universe. So there's no portion of it that can be walled off. And I think that the other image of Chan that expresses this in a lived form is the Bodhisattva. The Bodhisattva is Indra's jewel, and she's unafraid. I think that's the thing you'll feel too, that the more at ease and freedom you find inwardly, there's a corresponding piece of ease in how you walk through the world. There's less and less fear of what you might encounter in your own mind, and then also correspondingly out in the world. So I had a thought that I want to talk about that stanza in just a few lines. So the first part is we and everything we perceive are interwoven. So if you stop there, that would be a description of a kind of innocence, or a naive innocence, where that would be the image of Eden, where everything's interwoven. The lion and the lamb are sleeping together, and there's no self-consciousness, and the world is not yet divided into good and evil, but nothing yet is really happening. So it's life has not yet begun in that state. And so in some traditions, there's a strong pull to try to get back to that. And there's a pull in the psyche to try to want to just erase everything in my own mind, my own life, and my own feeling life that makes me feel ill at ease in some way. And I think if that project worked, I don't know if I would be that interested in it, but it might have some interest, but there's just a huge amount of effort that's required, because as you notice, if you sit even one period of meditation, your mind is not in your control. Just to say. Your mind is not in your control, your emotions are not in your control. Even your own body is not in your control. The images that pour through you are not in your control. Your dreams are a beautiful aspect of this, where they're really not in your control. They're outside the reach of the self that wants to manage and manicure, and I'm this, I'm not that. You notice if you'll get a dream, you might think, already the mind is editing it. oh, I don't really want to, that part's not important, and this part makes me look, wonderful, so I'll tell my friend about this. So there's always a kind of negotiation with reality. But in meditation, there's this marvelous vessel where you're held in silence and you're physically not able to go, and when your mind brings some sort of urgent request, it's got to be done now. You're held by the ritual, and actually by each other, to stay with the whole cascade of feelings and thoughts and emotions that come with that. And the image that always comes to me is Buddha and his enlightenment, right? That actually, every time you sit, that's who you are. You actually are Buddha, sitting under the Bodhi tree, and you're having some portion of his enlightenment, right? You're either seeing the morning star, and you and all beings are, this morning star, I and all beings awaken. You might be having that moment at some point you're sitting. Or you might be being attacked by your thoughts and feelings, Mara, throwing spears at you, or trying to seduce you, or offering you power. But Buddha didn't sit there and not feel anything. I think that's a real misconception of what happened on that night and what meditation is. Being Buddha felt, and everything poured through him. All the fear, all the longing, all the sorrows. And he touched the ground and stayed with all of the emotions and feelings and images. And so that when he walked into the world, he wasn't afraid of his own mind. And that's what the meditation practice gives you, some capacity to be able to tolerate the really, at sometimes violent, and you feel like you're drowning or you're burning or you're being dismembered. And the forces of transformation are really, especially at this point in Sesshin, they can be quite hard to bear, like on the edge of your capacity to bear. And it's really a tremendously beautiful and moving experience to have other people hold you when you can't. You can feel that, where you feel like you're on the edge, but you can feel everyone's with you. Even when you feel separate, in some way, they're with you in the separateness. And they might even be playing the part where, like, sometimes the feeling of separation is that you look out at the Zendo and you think, how did I end up here? These are the wrong people. This is the wrong practice. They think this is Zen. What do they have, these tonkas? They don't. So the other people might be holding a place for our refusal to enter life in that way. So we each play some portion of the awakening. So there's some desire to have some kind of island of safety or purity. Or someone told me this great story a couple of days ago, where she said the form it took when she was a teenager was that she thought, well, if I can just find, the perfect relationship, if I can just find, the one, and get married, and then that will be it. I'll have found my life. And then she said, but now she's replaced the relationship because she's married, so she now knows that that's not it. She replaced it with enlightenment. If I can just get to enlightenment, then I'll have the life I want, and I'll have, I don't know what we want, some feeling of homecoming, being at home. So what you find when you sit is that eventually Michelle talked about it beautifully on the first morning, where she said, you're going along fine as a child, and then there's no question about, do you belong here or not? It's not a question that arises even in your mind as a possibility that when you're just seamlessly inside of things. And then at some point, for different people, it's different times. It's usually somewhere, as she said, around adolescence. It can happen earlier or later. No, I don't think later. But you'll have some feeling of separation, feeling of pain, separation, that something's wrong, something's gone wrong. It can be a very mild feeling of just dis-ease, or it can be the whole range of, I cannot bear one more second in this retreat. Next bell, I'm out of here, I'm packing my bags, I am never coming back. That usually happens to me at least once every retreat. I'll have like sort of it might even be like in the shadow of the hawk will pass over as a viable possibility. So you'll have a feeling of the self, that's what we call the self. And in case you didn't know its attributes, I'll just give you a few of them. This is the not interwoven. So if we feel ourselves not interwoven with anything else, I'm this separate, solitary person, and I end here at my skin, then everything in the world is either for me or against me. Everything is seen as a threat, or it's seen as, not important, or it's seen as something I want to get for me. And a feeling of self-consciousness. This is one of the attributes of we're watching ourselves perform ourselves. We're watching ourselves do a pretty, mediocre performance of me. It's not even a great performance. So there's this feeling of watching ourselves, the feeling of something wrong, a feeling of separation. And when I first came to Zen, that was what really brought me here, was the feeling of acute separation, where I could see people, I could see all of you out there, but there was this feeling of very thick, about 6 inches plexiglass. And I just could not get through it to other people. And sometimes it wasn't there. Like if I'd go backpacking, it was not there at all. I was just in the world. So it was pretty clear that it had something to do with people, because when it wasn't there, I was backpacking, and then when I came back to town, suddenly it was there again. There was a lot of feeling of pain around that. So the feeling of separation, loneliness, isolation, suffering, the feeling of suffering. Gain, I'm in the world of gain and loss. Everything, as I said, is related to gaining or losing. Effort, tremendous feeling of effort. And also, that's sometimes what brings people to Zen, is this feeling of exhaustion, is they just cannot bear to keep up the hard work of making a me. And that's related to control. Basically the self, another word for the self is just effort. But the self is always interested in controlling circumstances, controlling inner circumstances and outer circumstances. And controlling outer circumstances is the only reason for that is to control what is arising inwardly that I can't bear. certainty. The self loves certainty. And I'll talk more about that in a bit. The identity, I guess the identity tag too. You'll find that when you're captured by the self, I guess what would be, something that your identity tag would be something that you're always bringing up in conversation. You always sort of move the conversation towards this subject so that either you'll be able to say something that will elevate your status, and so you'll gain, or so that people will know how terrible your life was, so that you can take on, the role of the victim. Or you might be moving the conversation away from things that feel threatening, that if they knew this about me, then, so you try to move things away from there so people don't see something that you identify with some kind of shame or feeling of failure. So it's a fixed sense of who's a me. There's a repetitive quality to it too. You'll notice that and that's part of the exhaustion, and I think that's something that brings people to Zen too, is that they just get tired of the same story of trouble, the same kind of trouble. At least in Zen you have a different kind of trouble. Getting enlightened. And so what you begin to see in meditation retreat is you start to see the contours of the self. There's enough silence and space where you start to see how you get caught and the whole cascade of how you maintain the self. So let me give you some examples of that. I think we need some stories. Well, I think I'll tell you a story about me that happened yesterday. I woke up and I was feeling, I don't know, sort of okay, but just like slight feeling of, I don't know, I'm just tired and slight feeling of not knowing how the day was going to go. And I was going along just fine, no problem so far, smooth sailing. I walk down the hall, I walk by the coffee machine, I walk out into the cloister, and my eyes turn to the left, and I see the sign-up sheets. And I see there are very few names on my list. And I see lots of names on other lists. And immediately, it happens really fast. There's a feeling of pain, of being outside of things, of being a failure, of being not included. So you'll have the experience of pain. I noticed that around the coffee, everything around coffee, a lot of people have been telling me stories about a lot of pain around coffee. So the self needs very little material, as you notice, for the amount of pain associated is so wildly out of proportion to the event. That's another clue. So you'll feel this tremendous amount of pain, piercing sort of pain. And then my next thought was, so I've had enough of a practice that I'm not completely, I'm not in, sometimes you're just completely in the throes of it, and you just believe every word. So you'll have that too, but that doesn't ever happen to me anymore. I don't know if that it's true or not, but it's pretty rare. So, but it still happens. So it happened, and then so the next thing is, why I'm just a terrible Zen teacher. This is a complete waste of my time. They don't need me here. They've got plenty of other teachers. I am just going to pack my bags, drive back home. There's lots of stuff to do there. There's chores and things. I will not be missed. And then the next thought is, so self-attack, and then the next thing, it goes out to all of you. They do not appreciate how hard I have worked. How many talks do I have to give before I can have some good Zen students who appreciate me and sign up on my list? So you'll find the self either attacking, the attack going inward, finding fault inward, or finding fault outward. And oftentimes it'll go back and forth. You'll notice your mind placing you at fault or others at fault. And then, all the reasons start to come in. You start building a case of why this is true. And then it's, so everything's always dissolving. And so the mind of the self has to work really hard to shore up the certainty. So it just keeps making the list, and you'll also notice there's a complete lack of a sense of humor. Your self has no sense of humor. And then everyone in the world is divided into those who are for or against the me. So people can't have any sort of neutral view. You either think you're on my side and you think I'm a great Zen teacher and they're terrible students. You agree with me, or you secretly think I'm a terrible teacher and you're an enemy. So there's no middle ground here. There's no Switzerland. No Switzerland in the self's universe. No neutral ground. And then you'll also notice that the self, then there's a sort of thread in which it attaches every other failure and every other pain and every other loss gets sort of brought in as evidence of your wrongness or their wrongness, either one, and you just start, there's just reams and reams of evidence of, so you can sit in meditation and just watch your mind do this. And it's a really, I guess what to say is about that moment is you'll have a felt sense of some kind of pain that's associated with it. Either it might be grief or loneliness or loss or humiliation or shame or loneliness, and it'll be in your body as well. And to be able to, and it'll have a kind of exaggerated quality to it too. It's almost as if every other loss that was never experienced gets, in some way you can't skip over any portion of your life. And it just has to have its, I remember my first sessions where there was just like a tsunami of grief that was just pouring over me. And I just had to sit there and let it wash through me. And then it became a kind of scouring wind that opened out this tremendous amount of space in me. And after those first couple of sessions, I noticed that the sorrow didn't come out in a kind of exaggerated or ways that were not corresponding to the situation, which used to happen. So the sorrow became fitting for the situation that I was in. So I think you've probably gotten a real feel for your particular form of how you separate yourself from the world, from life. And the precepts are actually really all about this. The precepts are all about defeating your attempts of making a separate me. Because if you take up one precept even for a day, one of the precepts that I was thinking about this today, that I really love this line, not contriving reality for yourself. Not contriving reality for yourself. And I guess that would be a definition of the self, is contriving reality for the self. Is the vow of not indulging in anger. So you'll find with the precepts that if you take one up with some kind of sincerity, you'll find that you can't live one day without breaking all the precepts in the literal way. And so they can't be about that. They can't be about following rules or turning yourself into a good person or pure person. They're about defeating that urge a part of what they're doing is defeating that impulse to make someone, well, your mind might be trying to earn your way into life by being good, or by being admired, or by being pure, or by being right, or by being wrong. Some people go that direction. But the precepts just won't let you do that, because you can't not kill. You're not in control. The precepts won't let you hold the position of staying in control. They defeat that. And so what you find is, while you're sitting, is that your situation is actually not an impediment to your awakening. It can feel like that. I think it can feel like, if I could just get rid of this sorrow or pain or jealousy but whatever is happening, and particularly what feels like it's something that's wrong, it's holding your awakening in its concentrated and dark form. And if you wall it off, the parts of yourself that you disapprove of, you're walling off your own awakening, your own capacity, the place where your awakening is held. And so the meditation practice gives you enough stability to be able to tolerate the strong currents of feeling that are roiling through you. And then you'll make discoveries. Like someone came in today, and there was another coffee incident where she said that it was something to do with coffee filters. And she was certain that the other person was, really upset, and this whole encounter had gone, some kind of disaster. And her meditation, she was, sort of roiling about what he felt and what she should do, and then should she go apologize, or should she work it out, or maybe it was his fault and maybe he should have. So all this is going on. And part of what the self does, contriving reality for yourself, you'll notice that what you do is you think you know what other people are thinking and feeling. And that's a part of that's a huge part of how the house of pain is built. By imagining we know things we don't know. We don't know. The not knowing runs through it. And you don't actually have to go and check with someone, because even if they told you, it's not going to help. You may have tried this, I can see. Working things out in that way isn't going to help. So we are getting close to running out of time as usual. So I think I just want to talk about one more thing. And that's that each thing stands in its own place. A student once asked me, well, if my mind is free, if I have a free mind, how will I know what to do if I'm not being compelled by right and wrong? How will I know? And I said, well, when you went to breakfast this morning, how did you know what to put on your tray? It's not that hard. It will be self-evident, it will be given. It'll come from the whole of the situation, how to respond. The more you include, the more accurate and healing will be your response. The more you include your inner life, your thoughts, your feelings, and not privilege them, they're not more or less important than everything else in the field. What the other person is thinking and feeling, the look on their face, the wind coming through the window, whatever's happening out in the world, all of it is one field, and the more you include, it will be given. And if you don't know, you can trust that you don't know. That will be given. I don't know yet what to do. I don't know if I should go back to school or leave my marriage or have blueberries or strawberries. I don't know yet. It will be given. So what else do I want to do? I want to tell this story or not? I think I'll tell you one short story. We have about each thing standing in its own place. At our house, we have a big paddock. It's about an acre of grass, just sort of wild. And there's a Jacob sheep that lives there. And if you don't know Jacob sheep, they're really sort of homely looking sheep. They have these big horns, and they're very shaggy and bad-tempered as well. So there's not a lot that's appealing about them. And we had the sheep named Poppet, and she's kind of a miraculous, she's strange, her history is strange because her mother lived in the paddock, but there were no male sheep. And one day, in the paddock, there's just the one, just Madge, Poppet's mother. And one day Madge, this was years before I was there, they look in the paddock and she's got, she's had these little, it's like some kind of immaculate conception reenacted. And so there's Poppet. Poppet lives her whole life in this little paddock, and he never left it. Her mother died a few years ago, and so when I moved onto the property, when I moved there a few years ago, I thought I would try to make friends with her, thinking, I don't know, just be a good citizen or something. And I tried to tame her, and I would bring her oats in a pan, and she would, at first, so she would, I'd just leave the pan, and then finally she would eat out of the pan, and then months later, she would eat out of my hands, and I thought, I've got this sheep, I'm her friend now. And then one day, she came in, and she was just, I don't know, kind of in an annoyed mood, and she stamped her foot, and I just didn't like that, so I just sort of moved the oats towards her a little more, so she'd just take the oats. And before I knew it, she had turned her head and pinned my hand to the ground. And she really didn't like that. And I thought, that's it. I am never, the relationship is broken. And I never, from that time, I just never tried to feed her anything. We had not a great relationship after that. But I don't know, she's part of things. And then a couple weeks ago, we were having the grass mowed, and we found her body. She had died. And she was by the far fence, and she'd been there for a few days, so she was, kind of halfway back into the earth. And a few days later, we dragged her body under. We thought, well, what should we do with her? Should we bury her or what? And it was just clear. We put her under some trees that she liked to stand under, this little grove of trees. So we dragged her by the horns under there, and then we started collecting the cut hay and putting it on her body to cover her. And that seemed clear too. And at one point, I was gathering some hay, and I thought, oh, John will think I'm a good citizen because I'm gathering hay. And I thought, how it just, the self appeared and tried to grab something for itself. And it was you'll feel that too, that in the middle of you're free and you're not thinking about things, and then suddenly the self goes and tries to extract something for it, so that it will be included, even though I was already inside of things. The very act of trying to grab something is the very thing that separated me. And then I saw that happen, and then I just went back to getting hay, and laying it on top of her. And then John did a chant for her. And, you know, I never really liked Poppet, but I felt this tremendous sorrow of all things that are lost, and the ceremonial quality of it's beyond liking and disliking. That this interconnection between us and every other thing, the weaving and interweaving, and some words just came to me. May the trees protect you. May the earth take you back into the source. So I think you'll know what to say. It will come to you. And even when you're caught, that has come to you in the same way as the words came to me. And each thing has a place. There isn't anything that's gone wrong in the whole of that ceremony with Poppet. Particularly even like the part where I was trying to earn my way into a place that I already was. So I think that's a good place to stop.